Hey, this is Paul Solt from Brew Coffee, and we are brewing with Abra Coffee. So I just got this. Paula sent me a package, and super excited about this. I just brewed a batch, and we're going to try a second brew. This has a bit of maybe a darker roast than I typically get from Joe Bean, but it was interesting. It's got a molasses taste in my first brew. I kind of felt like it was over extracted, so we're gonna try this a second time. And what I'm going to do is first scoop out some of the coffee. So in the previous video, I talked about how I don't like using these Ziplocs, and I just, well, let's start over. That's not right. I gotta tear my scale. Let's try that one more time. Okay, the motion is gonna throw off the scale as well, so we want that to settle so that it actually is 0. And let's try it again. So I lost a bean over here. Let's put that in the pile. And I like to use my hands after they're clean, so clean hands is totally fine. There's one bean here that looks a little off. I'm gonna get rid of that. So any bean that is discolored is probably not something you wanna brew with. Okay, and I'm gonna go for 21.3 or so grams. When I'm brewing, I'm gonna try and get 21 exactly, but I know that when I grind this, potentially I might not reach my target weight if I don't have a little over. Now this is with a 1/10 of a gram accurate scale, which I highly recommend. Next, we're gonna start rinsing this filter. I have a little bit of water here. And then I'm going to pick this up because that's going to improve our drain time. So it's really important that you pick up your filter because there's some kind of suction, and that suction is going to make your filter clog in your recipe. So that is the best bet. The second thing that I highly recommend, or actually the primary thing I highly recommend, is these filters seem to be the most consistent. I've had too many issues with 100-pack filters just not draining normally. So you can get this in all 3 sizes, size 1, size 2, size 3. Right now I am reheating my water, so it's just heating up. And we're good to go. Give this a little bit more water. That's boiling hot. So I like my water super hot. Now if I can turn this around. Here's my kettle. I have modded my kettle so that I can have a little thermometer here, but I don't go by the thermometer anymore. I just go as hot as possible. So this is just off the boil. I'm not gonna let it sit, and we're gonna start brewing with it. So next up, we just need to get rid of this water. Otherwise, we're gonna have a diluted cup of coffee. Now, when I do this, I try to keep those handles away so that I'm not hitting them when I'm pouring with the kettle here. Okay, so we've got our coffee. I always like to tare this, so let's 0 out our scale, and then we're gonna carefully pour 21 grams. If I go over or under, I'll just keep sort of adjusting this, making a little mess here. Typically I would tap this as we get closer, but that's actually blocking your view. Okay. Have a tiny bit, really not much, so you can see that it's really important to go a little bit extra. And you can see now evaporation has caused this to sort of shift around. So we're right on the cusp of the 20.9 and the 21 gram marker. That's fine. Evaporation from the water that we poured here is going to cause this to lose mass. I'm gonna 0 that out. That's close enough for me. And let's start the app. So I'm using the Brew Coffee app. And again, we had issues with the last cup of coffee. So I have 1 cup of coffee, and let's taste it again. So this is Abra Coffee, and it's actually pretty good. As it's cooled down, it's actually very tasty. It's a little darker than most of the coffees that I drink, but it's pretty good. My biggest complaint was it was a little over extracted, and that's because we didn't hit our 3-minute timing. So let's take a look at the app real quick. This is an app that I developed that helps me brew coffee every single morning. It's called Brew Coffee, and you can download in the video description, you can download the beta test if you want to join the beta. It's currently in beta. And here is our timing. So the typical recipe is 2 minutes and 30 seconds for a Hario V60. That's what ships with the app. But I find that with a lot of these denser coffees or even decafs, I really have to be more aggressive on the pour. And so what we can do is we can just sort of shift that towards a faster pour. And that's going to make us pour faster. So this is kind of like a marathon pacer, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But that's our setup. Our ratios down here at the bottom. We've got a 16.2 to 1 that we're using for our brew strength. And let's get started with that. Okay, so we've got our recipe dialed in, and this is just going to sort of help us pace. If you have your phone next to your scale, just be careful you don't touch, because that horizontal connection is actually putting weight on the scale. So make sure there's a separation there so that it's not skewing things. Now this is going to be our pace leader, so I'm going to move the camera over slightly, and we are going to follow along. So the first stage is the bloom. This is where we just get everything wet. I will stir with this spoon, and then we're gonna use 2 hands with a towel to try and get a more even extraction this time around. So let's hit start, and I'll start pouring. This initial pour, I don't always use 2 hands. I just try to get it in as quick as possible. We wanna get around 42. I went a little extra. That's okay. Next time we'll try and control it a little bit better, but we do want to make sure we get all of the coffee wet. And so by stirring and avoiding these bubbles, we know that we have all of the grounds wet. Next up, we need to rinse. And we start our pour. So here I'll take the towel, put it under the kettle, and start pouring. And my pace leader is telling me that I'm a little behind, but that's okay. We want a nice even pour. We don't want to go super fast because that's going to cause it to extract faster. So the more agitation, the more turbulence that you create, the more coffee gets extracted. And the bulk, when we're looking at coffee, the bulk of the extraction actually happens in the first minute. So I try to be as gentle as possible with my pour, and we're just going around. And you can see that my flow rate's a little bit weird, but I am ahead of my pace, which is where I typically like to be. Being ahead is important for this brew. And actually I'm going to show you a technique. Since we had issues with drain time, let's put that down. I'm going to pick this up carefully and put it back down. And that can help us get a little bit more liquid in here if this is going slow. So if you notice that you're not quite where you want to be, you can try picking it up and see if that fixes your drain. Sometimes I'll pick it up 2 times, sometimes I won't pick it up at all. We're keeping up with our pace for the most part, which is good. So I'm expecting that we probably won't go 27 seconds over, maybe 10 seconds over. It still feels like the drain is a little slow. Okay, I went over a little too much, so I'm gonna scoop out and then I'm gonna stir. There we go. And if I was paying attention, I wouldn't have done that, and then we could have just stirred, but mistakes happen, especially when it's early in the morning. So you really don't want grinds up on the ridges. So as quickly as possible, if you can give that stir to get those grinds to incorporate, That's going to help with the overall drawdown. Almost there, and we are, I would say, done. So I typically let it go a little bit after. I was looking to see the drain, and so I would say that finished draining around 5 seconds after. So that's good. Let's see how this tastes compared to the other. Again, I'm gonna aerate the coffee first, so let's heat up a thermos. And then we're just gonna go back and forth 3 to 5 times. What this does is it changes the mouthfeel of the coffee, just like decanting wine or shaking a cocktail is going to do. Actually, if you want, I do have a recipe on Hario V60 iced, which is amazing if you like a cold brew made hot with the Hario V60. And the shaken coffee definitely has some really interesting textures. Okay, next up, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pour a little out, and I'm not gonna taste this right away, but I am gonna refill my other cup with the other coffee so that we can do a taste comparison. One of the reasons that I have the time elapsed continue to count up is that it helps us know how long the coffee has cooled. So now I can use that to let me know when I want to taste. So I want to taste after about 2 minutes here. And then let's grab my other coffee. So I made a previous batch in this thermos, and we're going to do an A/B test comparing the two. All right, so I've got my 2 coffees. This is the first batch, this is the new batch. I'm gonna smell it first. Oh, that's so much better. Well, at least that's my first take. I have to compare, but really trying to hit that 3-minute recipe is key to unlocking the sweetness. And so I'm getting some of the sweetness. So Abra Coffee is using, they call it the, I've never heard this term before. It's the full black honey process. And so that allows them to get more sweetness because they're only using the ripest sugar-rich cherries. And I'm definitely getting more sweetness in this batch. But the only way to really tell is to compare to something else. So let's compare to my previous batch. And in this one, I previously had thought it was a little over-extracted, a little bitter, not as sweet as I'd like. Still had some of the molasses, but it just wasn't as balanced. Yeah, this one tastes, it actually tastes darker. It tastes drier. So if you've ever had a dry wine, I'm getting a little bit of drying on my tongue, a little pucker, just a slight pucker. So that's how you know that this is over extracted, is because it just lacks the sweetness. And so if you can get coffee sweet, it's really delicious to drink. You don't need to add sugar, you don't need to add cream. You can just drink it black because it's just so tasty. That's really good. I don't taste papaya, which is a plus for me. But I definitely get molasses. I'm getting some sugary flavors. I'm not sure what else I'm tasting in here. I'd say probably cherry. I'm tasting cherry, some kind of fruity flavor. So that's Abra Coffee. Thanks for watching, and we were brewing with the Brew Coffee app, which makes it super easy to pace your pour so that you can be more consistent, which is going to help you get sweeter cups of coffee. I am hosting a workshop on setting up your grinder and finding the right grind size for Hario V60. So if you are interested in that, that's going to be upcoming on October 24th. And if you're watching this after that date, I will have the video available and you can join that workshop. So I'll have the link down in the description down below. If you liked this video or if you learned something, hit the like button. And if you want to subscribe, you can do that as well. You can follow me either on Instagram or you can follow me on YouTube. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.